Alright, today I'm going to be tearing into a 1987 Kawasaki KX250 motorcycle. We're going to tear into the top end. I'm going to go over a couple of those components here, your reed valve assembly. We're going to do your clutches, dig into the clutch assembly, your kickstarter gear, show you a couple components there, and then go over to your charging system and then end up splitting your case there. Getting into your crankshaft assembly and your transmission. So I'm going to start here by pulling our cylinder head cover off here. Our spark plug is loose. We actually are able to kick this motorcycle over here, and it's got good compression, so I'm curious to see what we've got going on inside our motor here. It does not run. We've got a handful of 12mm bolts around the outside here, and then 3 8mm bolts that we're going to remove. Alright, cylinder head bolts are off there. We're going to go ahead and remove those and set those aside so we don't lose them. Alright, we'll lift our cylinder head up there. We've got your cylinder head here. Inspect this dome, make sure that's in good condition. Replace this gasket. This is a very thick gasket here. You want to make sure this gets replaced every time. You can just take and pull that off, clean this up, make sure that's in good condition. We'll throw this gasket away, and we'll order a new one for the top there. This is your head gasket. Underneath your cylinder is considered your base gasket. So removing your reed valve assembly now, it's over here. We've got your inlet boot here, and then we've got 6 8mm bolts around the outside of this. And take and pull that off. There's your boot there. We've got another gasket here. Make sure that gets replaced. And then we've got your reed valve here. Your pedals are here. These can be replaced either side here. You want to make sure there's no breaks in here, any cracks. You want to make sure that these are closed. Make sure they're not opened up. These are actually in really good condition here. Make sure those are clean before going back together. To get our cylinder off now, we've got 14mm bolts or nuts on the outside here. And then we've got your valve underneath here, 8mm bolts holding this cover on. Pull that off there. All right, once we get these cylinder nuts off of here, the 4 nuts, we can go ahead and remove this cylinder. Now, we can, and you typically want to do this before you remove these cylinder nuts, raise and lower this piston here just by kicking over the Kickstarter. You can inspect those cylinder walls to kind of get an idea what you're dealing with here before you get too far into it. Now, sometimes these piston and cylinders will actually seize up. You won't actually be able to kick these over. If that's the case, you know you're going to have a much more difficult time pulling this cylinder off. This one spins over freely. The walls actually look like they're in great condition. The piston, from what we can tell from the top side here, looks like it's in great condition, but obviously we're going to need to inspect that a little bit more when we get this cylinder pulled off. Now at this time, you can grab a rubber mallet. I take a couple different areas. I'll tap on this, and just being really careful you don't damage any of those areas. If you come in here, hit on this water inlet here, you could potentially break that since it's such a thin-walled pipe there. If you get under here, your exhaust manifold area, or underneath your reed cage here, that's a little bit thicker aluminum. A lot of times you can tap that with a rubber mallet and get that started being pulled up there. And then a lot of times once you get it started, you can just take and work that up with your hands there. Now that is your cylinder there. I'm going to dump out the coolant that we've got in the top, and that's a good thing just to get out of there so you're not dumping that all over your crankcase there. Inspect your top here. You can inspect your cylinder walls. I'll show you in a separate video how to measure those, how to accurately get measurements on your barrel there. That way you can order the correct piston if that's what you need, or order the correct barrel, or take this to a machine shop and get this bored out to the correct sizes there. Your valve on the side here is going to stay inside of your cylinder assembly there, and you can take and move that in and out just like that, and it's going to take and spin these shafts here. Make sure that that's functioning properly, and again, inspect this gasket here, replace it, clean up these surfaces here on the actual crankcase and on the bottom of the cylinder here. This is called your base gasket. Setting that aside, I'm going to pull this piston off at this time. I'm going to grab a pick. With the pick, I'm going to take and shove, there's a grooved end in your piston there. You can take it and get that pick inside that groove there, and you can take and either take my finger and put it over top of this hole here so that our shirt clip doesn't go flying across the room. If you're ordering new piston and rings, that set there, they're going to come with new clips. If you order this from Kawasaki, it's probably not going to come with a new piston and clips there. A lot of times those are sold separately when you get them from the manufacturer. Okay, now you can just take your fingers, shove it in through that hole there. You can take and pull that pin out as far as you need to pull it out. That way you can get that piston off of your crankshaft there. There's your bearing. You can, if you're going to reuse this piston, and say you're just replacing the rings, this is as far as you need to go. Actually, if you're just replacing your rings, you can leave this piston on your crankshaft. But I do like to take it off, inspect these bearings. I like to replace these bearings every time you're at least replacing your rings. Typically, I'll go ahead and replace the piston as well while we're doing it because we're here. You are able just to replace those rings. And again, at the same time, I like to replace that bearing. It's inexpensive. It's a good thing to get done while you're this far into it. Our crankshaft is here. We'll get down into that bottom end. You want to be able to spin this over freely. Make sure there's no abnormal noises or catches on there. If there is, obviously we're going to go farther than this. Now to tear into our charging system on this motorcycle, I'm going to tip this engine up here so you can see what we're doing. I got 8mm bolts all the way around the outside. On this particular one, we've got an 8mm bolt holding this shifter on. I think typically they're 10. Pull that out. We can pull this shifter up. All right, we'll get this shifter pulled up here. Now we're going to get into this charging system on this 1987 Kawasaki KX250. Like to make sure our area is clean. That way we're not getting any unwanted dirt and debris down inside our charging